The night sky burned red over the colony of White Peak. Kalith Silverweave stood on the highest tower watching everything she had sworn to protect turn to ash. Below her, the screams had finally stopped. That was somehow worse than the noise. Her silver hair, once tied in the traditional warrior braids of her people, hung loose and dirty around her face. Blood covered her armor. Most of it was not hers. Her hands shook as she gripped the stone wall. She had been fighting for 3 days without rest. Behind her, a low whimper made her turn. Silver mist lay on the cold stone floor. The dragon was young, barely 15 years old. In dragon years, she was still a child. Her silver scales, which should have gleamed like moonlight, were dull and cracked. Dark veins spread across her body where the Varkothian weapons had struck her. Kalith knelt beside her bonded companion and placed a hand on the dragon's massive head. Silver Mist's breathing was shallow and painful. Each breath sounded like it might be her last. The elf warrior had tried everything. She had used every healing spell she knew. She had burned through her magical reserves until her own body began to fail. Nothing worked. The Varkothian anti-magic weapons were designed to corrupt and destroy magical beings from the inside out. They were weapons of torture as much as war. Kalith looked at the communication device on her wrist. The screen showed 15 sent messages. 15 desperate pleas for help. 0 responses that mattered. She had contacted the Elvish High Council first. They were her people. Surely they would send aid. The response came 6 hours later. A junior council member, not even important enough to have a name she recognized, sent a formal message. The outer colonies were classified as non-essential. Resources could not be spared. They advised immediate evacuation and abandonment of defensive positions. Evacuation. As if there was anywhere to evacuate to. The Varkothians controlled the space around the planet. Their ships circled like predators. Any vessel that tried to leave was destroyed within minutes. Next, she had tried the Dwarven Star clans. The dwarves were known for their loyalty and their love of a good fight. Surely they would help. Their response was even shorter. They were protecting their mining operations in the core systems. They could not spare ships or soldiers for conflicts in the Outer Rim. The Federation of Allied Worlds sent back a diplomatic message full of sympathy and empty promises. They expressed deep concern. They promised to bring the matter before the Council. They suggested that perhaps a diplomatic solution could be found. They did everything except actually help. Kalith had even contacted her own sister. Lyra Lai was a council member with power and influence. If anyone could send help, it was her. The response broke something inside Kalith that she did not know could break. Her sister told her to abandon the colony. Lyra Lai said that some battles could not be won. She said that Kalith was throwing away her life for people who were already dead. She said that the outer colonies were always at risk and that everyone knew it. She said that a wise warrior knew when to retreat. Retreat. Give up. Let them die. Kalith looked down at the burning colony. There were 3,000 people down there when the attack began. Farmers, artisans, teachers, children. People who had built homes and lives on this world. People who trusted that the civilized galaxy would protect them. Now maybe 300 were left. They huddled in the underground shelters, trapped like animals. The Varkothians were not in a hurry. They were taking their time. They fed on fear and suffering. That was how they powered their ships and weapons. They harvested terror like others harvested crops. Silver Mist whimpered again. Kalith felt the pain through their bond. It was like knives cutting into her own chest. The dragon was dying. Without help, she would be dead before sunrise. The elf stood and walked to the edge of the tower. The Varkothian forces had pulled back for the night. They were camped just outside the city walls. Their fires dotted the darkness like evil stars. They knew she could not escape. They knew no help was coming. They were letting her suffer because they enjoyed it. Kalith pulled up her communication device again. She scrolled through every contact she had. Every name. Every organization. Every possibility. All of them had either ignored her or told her no. The entire civilized galaxy had abandoned her to die. Her finger stopped on a frequency she had almost deleted. It was marked with a simple word. Humans. Everyone knew about humans. They were the newcomers. The dangerous ones. They had appeared in the galaxy 30 years ago and immediately started causing problems. They refused to follow the established order. They freed slaves when the law said slavery was legal in some sectors. They shared technology that was supposed to be controlled. They fought wars they had no business fighting. The civilized races feared them. Not because humans were stronger, though their military was impressive. They feared them because humans were unpredictable. They valued strange things. They made decisions that made no logical sense. They risked everything for reasons no one else understood. The Elvish Council had warned all elves to avoid contact with humans. They were too chaotic, too violent, too emotional. They could not be trusted to behave in civilized ways. Calith laughed. It was a bitter, broken sound. Civilized. The civilized galaxy had watched her people die and done nothing. The civilized races had abandoned children to be harvested for fuel. That was what civilization meant. She looked at Silvermist again. The dragon's eyes were closed now. Her chest barely moved. What did she have to lose? Calith activated the human frequency. She did not know if anyone would hear it. She did not know if they would care. But she was out of options and out of time. She spoke into the communicator. Her voice was rough from screaming orders and breathing smoke. She told them where she was. She told them what was happening. She told them about the 300 people trapped underground. She told them about Silvermist. She did not beg. She was too tired to beg. She just stated facts. When she finished, she waited. 1 minute. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. Nothing, of course. Why would they help? Why would anyone help? She was learning the hardest lesson of her long life. In the end, everyone stood alone. Calith sat down next to Silvermist and took the dragon's head into her lap. If they were going to die, they would die together. She began singing an old elvish lullaby. Her mother had sung it to her centuries ago. It was about stars and moonlight and being safe at home. She sang to her dying dragon and watched the Varkothian fires burn in the darkness. She did not notice when exhaustion finally pulled her into sleep. She did not feel when Silvermist's breathing became even more shallow. She did not hear when something changed in the sky above them. She did not know that 48 hours later everything would be different. She did not know that the monsters were coming. And she definitely did not know that the monsters were coming to save her. On the edge of known space where stars grew thin and silence thickened like old blood, the gray ship hung motionless, its hull scarred by fire and time. Inside, Alara moved with the quiet precision of someone who had long stopped expecting rescue. Her silver eyes flicked over flickering panels, her fingers tracing error codes that spelled doom in cold, unfeeling light. Oxygen levels were dropping. Power cells were failing. And outside the reinforced viewport, the endless dark watched back. Zin lay coiled near the rear bulkhead, his scales shifting between deep violet and charcoal as his breathing slowed to conserve energy. He was not large by dragon standards, but his presence filled the cramped cabin like a storm held in check. His eyes opened as Ilara passed a hand over his spine, warm and trembling. She did not speak. Words had become too heavy, but her thoughts brushed against his like wind over dry grass, soft and sad. He understood. He always did. For 17 cycles they had run. 17 times the twin suns of the Outer Rim had risen and set, while the Crother Dominion hunted them like ghosts through the void. Ilara had sent every distress signal her ship could carry. She had used old Soltheri frequencies, harmonic pulses, encrypted bursts meant for allies who no longer existed. Some signals were ignored. Others were mocked. One reply had simply read, "You are already dead. Stop wasting bandwidth." She had stopped sending calls 3 cycles ago. Now she only plotted how to make her last stand count. If she could not save her people, at least she could take a few, Crothar with her into the dark. But then on the 18th cycle, something impossible happened. A ship dropped. Out of warp, not with the thunder of warships, but with the soft groan of overworked engines. It was small, barely more than a cargo hauler. Its hull patched with mismatched plating and scorched weld lines. No insignia marked its side, only a faded name painted near the bow, the Larkspur. It hung there for a long moment, silent, respectful. Then a voice came through the comm. Not sharp or demanding, but calm and clear. "Are you the one they call the last Siltheri?" Ilara froze. No one used that title anymore. It was a name from old songs, a whisper among scholars. The Crother did not care for titles. They only cared for erasure. She hesitated, then keyed the response. Who asks? A pause. Then the voice again. "Friends, maybe. Or just people who heard your song." Song. Not signal. Not code. Song. That word unraveled something in her chest. The Siltheri did not broadcast data. They wove meaning into resonance-layered tones that carried emotion as much as information. To most of the galaxy it sounded like static. Only those who knew the old ways would recognize it as anything more than noise. She allowed the docking sequence. The airlock hissed open and 4 women stepped through. They wore patched flight suits and carried no weapons. Their faces were tired, but their eyes were sharp. The one in front had short, dark hair and hands stained with grease. She offered a small nod. "I am Claire." "This is Maya, Leah, and Dana." Alara stood straight, her posture rigid. She did not offer her name. "Not yet, you heard a song." "Why, because we listen," Claire said simply. "Most people only hear what they want. We hear what is." Maya stepped forward, holding a sealed pack. "Power cells. Good ones. We scavenged them from a derelict freighter near the belt. They should keep your life support running another 10 cycles. Leah held out a thermal blanket and a foil-wrapped meal. "Your dragon looks cold and hungry." Dana said nothing. She only looked at Zin with wide, curious eyes as if seeing a myth made real. Alara studied them. They were human, feared across many systems for their unpredictability, their violence, their rapid expansion. Yet these women carried no arrogance. No demand, only quiet offers. Zin stirred. A low rumble vibrated in his chest, not a threat but a question. Alara placed a hand on his neck. "It is all right. For now." Over the next few days, the humans worked. They did not ask for access codes or control of the ship. They simply helped. Maya crawled into the engine bay and rerouted coolant lines with steady hands, humming old Earth tunes as she worked. Leah coaxed Zin into eating with strips of synthetic protein and soft whistles that reminded him of nesting calls. Dana sat cross-legged on the floor, sketching constellations from Alara's descriptions onto a worn datapad, her fingers moving with reverence. Claire stayed near the cockpit, watching Alara as she monitored the long-range scanners. "You are still running," she said one evening. Alara did not look away from the screen. "Running is all that is left, not if you have somewhere to stand." Alara finally turned. "You do not know what you are offering. Try us." So Alara told them. Not everything, but enough. The Krothar were not conquerors in the old sense. They did not enslave or tax or demand tribute. They erased. Entire species vanished from records. Planets were scoured clean of history. Even language was stripped away. The Krothar believed silence was purity, and the Silthari, with their songs, their living archives, their deep ties to cosmic memory, were an abomination to that silence. The last archive remained hidden in the core of Virelis, a dead moon deep in the fractured belt. It held the collective memory of her people, 10,000 minds woven into crystalline roots. If the Krothar reached it, they would not just destroy it. They would unmake it, reduce it to blank data and empty stone, and they were close, too close. When she finished, the cabin was quiet. Zin rested his head on her lap, his breath warm and slow. The humans exchanged glances, not with fear, but with something heavier. Resolve. "We lost our home too," Claire said softly. "The Krothar hit Persephone colony 3 cycles back, burned the fields, melted. The schools turned the river to glass. We were off-world on a supply run. Came back to silence." Maya nodded. "No bodies, no wreckage. Just smooth ground where a town used to be." Leah touched the scar on her forearm. "They took my brother." "Not killed. Just he removed. Like he never existed." Dana finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "They tried to erase us. But we remember. And remembering is resistance." Alara felt something shift inside her. Not hope, not yet, but the first crack in the ice around her heart. "Why help me?" she asked. "I am nothing to you. You are someone they want." "Gone," Claire said. "That makes you family." The next morning, the humans proposed a plan. They would not fight the Krothar directly. They had no weapons, no fleet, no backup. But they had something rarer. They had stealth. And they had a ship that looked like junk but flew like a ghost. "We can draw them away," Claire said, spreading a rough star map on the table. "The Larkspur has a modified core. We can mimic a Silthari energy signature just enough to fool their long-range sensors. They will chase us while you reach Virelis." Alara shook her head. "It is suicide. They will tear your ship apart maybe, but we have tricks. And we have each other." Zin lifted his head, his eyes gleaming. He sent a thought to Alara, not words but an image of fire. Not destruction but ignition. A spark in the dark. She looked at the humans. At Claire's steady gaze, at Maya's calloused hands, at Leah's quiet strength, at Dana's unwavering attention. They were not soldiers. They were survivors. And in their eyes she saw something she had not seen in years. Recognition. "You do not owe me this," she said. "We owe it to everyone they have erased." Claire replied, "And to everyone they will erase next." That night, Ilara sang for the first time in cycles. Not a battle hymn, not a dirge. A lullaby her mother used to hum as the twin moons rose over their home valley. Zin curled beside her, his scales glowing faintly in response. The humans listened from the doorway, not speaking, not moving, just bearing witness. In the morning, the Larkspur prepared to launch. Maya checked the thrusters one last time. Leah loaded emergency rations. Dana synced their comms to a hidden frequency. Claire stood at the airlock and turned to Ilara. "When this is over," she said, "you will not be alone." Ilara nodded. For the first time in a long time, she believed it might be true. As the Larkspur pulled away, its engines flaring with borrowed Silthari energy, Ilara watched from the viewport. Tears traced silent paths down her cheeks. Below, the stars burned cold and distant. But in the small ship ahead of her, something warm moved through the dark. The humans were not saviors. They were not heroes in the grand sense. They were just women who refused to look away. And in a galaxy that had forgotten her, that was more than enough. Zin pressed against her side, his mind brushing hers with a single clear thought. "We fly now, yes," she whispered. "We fly." Varelli's hung in the black like a forgotten thought, its surface cracked and coal dusted with the ash of dead stars. Magnetic storms swirled around it like ghosts unwilling to leave. The moon had no name in most galactic charts, only a catalog number assigned by survey drones centuries ago. But to the Silthari, it was the heart of memory. The last vault where their voices still echoed. Ilara guided her ship through the turbulence, her hands steady on the controls, though her pulse hammered in her throat. Behind her, Zin lay coiled in the cargo bay. His scales drinking in the ambient radiation, his eyes fixed on the viewport. He did not need words to know what was at stake. The archive was not just data. It was soul. The Larkspur had drawn 2 of the 3 Crother warships away, its engines flaring with a false Silthari signature that shimmered like heat haze across the void. Claire's voice had crackled over the comm one last time before static swallowed it. "Go. We have them chasing shadows." But one warship remained. It orbited Varelli's like a vulture, its obsidian hull absorbing starlight, its cannons humming with entropy charge. Ilara knew it would not be fooled for long. She had minutes, maybe less. She brought her vessel down in a shallow crater on the far side of the moon, away from the main entrance. The landing struts groaned as they bit into ancient rock. Outside, the wind howled thin and sharp, carrying particles that scraped against the hull like fingernails. She sealed her environmental suit, checked her sidearm, a relic from her people's final stand, and turned to Zin. "Stay close," she thought. He rose in one fluid motion, his wings folding, tight against his body, his claws clicking softly on the metal floor. He carried no weapons, but his very presence was a weapon. His bioresonance could shatter Crothar armor if tuned right. If they were lucky, they moved through the dust, their footsteps silent. The entrance to the archive was hidden beneath a slab of black stone carved with glyphs that only glowed when touched by Silthari blood. Ilara pressed her palm to the surface. The stone shivered, then sank into the ground, revealing a spiraling tunnel lit by veins of soft blue light. The air inside was thick with memory. It hummed against her skin like a half-remembered dream. The walls pulsed faintly with ancestral voices. She heard her mother's laughter. Her brothers song the chants of the Elder Council as they sealed the archive for the last time. Each step deeper was a step into grief, but also into purpose. They reached the central chamber. It was vast, a dome of living crystal rising from the floor like a tree grown from starlight. At its heart floated the core matrix, a sphere of shifting light that held the thoughts of 10,000 Silthari minds. It glowed gently, breathing in time with the moon itself. But they were not alone. A squad of Crother shock troops stood in a half-circle around the core, their armor matte black, their faces hidden behind masks that wept black vapor. They moved without sound, without breath, and at their center stood a figure taller than the rest, his presence heavy like a collapsed star. The Hollow. The Eraser. The one who had unmade worlds with a thought. His gauntlet hovered inches from the core. As Ilara watched in horror, he touched it. The light dimmed. The hum faded. A wave of silence rolled through the chamber. The glyphs on the walls went dark. The voices stopped. No, Ilara did not think. She ran. Zan exploded from the shadows, his wings snapping open, his maw opening not to roar, but to release a pulse of resonant energy. It was not fire. It was frequency. A chord woven from Silthari lullabies and dragon song older than galaxies. The sound hit the Crother like a physical blow. Their armor cracked, not from heat or force, but from dissonance. The Crothar believed in silence, purity, emptiness. But this sound was full. It carried joy, sorrow, memory, identity, things they had long erased from themselves. Masks shattered. Beneath them were faces smooth and blank. No eyes, no mouths, just smooth skin stretched over bone. They had deleted even their own features in pursuit of nothingness. The hollow turned. His form seemed to ripple like smoke given shape. "You cannot win," he said, his voice not spoken but felt inside the skull. "All things end in silence." "Not all," Ilara whispered. She placed both hands on the core crystal and sang. It was not a battle cry. It was the lullaby her mother sang as the sky burned over their homeworld. Simple, soft, full of love. Zin joined her, his roar harmonizing with her voice, weaving a chord that vibrated through the moon's bones. The archive responded. Light surged. The walls bloomed with glyphs brighter than before. The floor trembled. And from the core a wave of pure memory exploded outward, a tidal force of identity, history, and defiance. It filled the chamber, then burst through the tunnels, racing toward the surface. The Krothar screamed, not in pain but in terror. Their emptiness was being filled against their will. Memories not their own flooded their minds. Faces, names, songs they had erased centuries ago returned like ghosts demanding to be seen. The hollow fell to his knees. His mask split down the middle. Beneath it was not smooth skin, but a face twisted by forgotten grief. He whispered a name, his own. A name he had not spoken in 500 cycles. Ilara felt the power building in the core. Too much, too fast. The archive was not built to hold this kind of release. It was destabilizing. Cracks spiderwebbed across the crystal. The light flickered wildly. It would detonate. And when it did, the blast would not just destroy the moon. It would scatter the memory wave across the galaxy. A final broadcast of Siltheri existence. But it would also kill her and Zin, and anyone still on the surface. She turned to him. Go, she thought. Save yourself. He pressed his forehead to hers. His eyes said no. Then a voice crackled in her earpiece. Ilara, it is Dana. We are on the surface. We found a secondary entrance. We are coming in. What? No, get out. The core is failing. Too late, Claire's voice cut in. We are already inside, and we are not leaving without you. Through the tunnel, Ilara saw them. Claire limping but upright, her flight suit torn. Maya carrying a jury-rigged stabilizer unit. Leah with a medkit slung over her shoulder. Dana holding a Siltheri pulse rifle she must have scavenged from a fallen Krothar. How did you survive? The Larkspur was destroyed? Claire said. But we ejected in the pod. Rode the shockwave here. Figured you might need backup. You are insane. Maybe. But we are here. Maya dropped to her knees beside the core. She connected the stabilizer to the base of the crystal. It is not much, but it might buy us time. Leah injected nanite gel into the fractures, slowing the decay. Dana stood guard, her rifle humming softly. Claire walked up to Ilara. You do not have to do this alone anymore. Ilara looked at them, at the humans who had lost everything and still chose to stand in the heart of a dying archive, who had faced the void and said not today. She nodded. Together they worked. Ilara sang to calm the core. Zin pulsed steady resonance to balance the energy. Maya rerouted power through salvaged conduits. Leah monitored the structural integrity. Dana watched the tunnels for any surviving Krothar. Claire stood at the center, her hands on the crystal as if she could hold it together by will alone. The moon groaned around them. Dust rained from the ceiling. The light pulsed like a dying heartbeat. We cannot save it all, Ilara said, but we can save the essence. She reached into the core and pulled free a shard no larger than her palm. It glowed with soft silver light, warm to the touch. The primary memory matrix, the seed of her people. As she held it, the core dimmed. The hum faded to a whisper. The archive was spent. We have to go now, Claire said. They ran. The tunnels collapsed behind them, stone and crystal falling like rain. Sin carried the shard in his claws, his wings half unfurled, ready to shield them. They reached the surface as the first shockwave hit. The ground split open, light erupting from the fissures. The humans' escape pod waited near the crater, its hatch open. They scrambled inside just as Varelli's began to break apart. From orbit, they watched the moon shatter. Not in fire, but in light. A million fragments bloomed like petals, scattering memory across the void. The remaining Krothar ship drifted aimlessly, its crew driven mad by the memory wave. Moments later, it self-destructed in silence. In the pod, no one spoke. They were bruised, exhausted, hollow, but alive. Ilara held the shard in her hands. It pulsed gently like a heartbeat. Zin lay beside her, his eyes half closed but alert. The humans sat in silence, sharing water and quiet glances. Claire finally spoke. What no, Ilara looked at the stars. Now we remember, and we make sure others do too. The war was not over. The Krothar still ruled 1,000 worlds. But for the first time in years, Alara was not running alone. She had allies. Not because they owed her, but because they chose to care. And in a galaxy that had forgotten her, that was everything. The escape pod drifted through the silent dark, its hull still warm from the moon's final breath. Inside, the air was thick with exhaustion and the metallic tang of burnt wiring. Alara sat curled against the rear wall, the memory shard cradled in her lap, its soft glow painting silver lines across her face. Sin lay beside her, his breathing slow but steady, his scales still shimmering with residual energy from the archive's last pulse. The humans sat scattered around the cramped cabin, their faces drawn but alert. No one spoke. Words felt too heavy for the moment. They had survived. That was enough. But survival was never the end, only the beginning. Claire broke the silence first. We need a plan. The Krothar will not forget this. They will come harder now. Alara nodded. They saw the memory wave. It touched their minds. They will fear it, and fear makes them cruel. Maya rubbed her temples. We have no ship, no weapons, no safe port, just this pod and a shard of light. Leah looked at Zen, and a dragon. Dana traced a finger along the pod's cracked console. We have something else too. Proof. The Krothar tried to erase the Silthari, but now the galaxy has seen them, heard them, even if only for a moment. Alara closed her eyes. The memory wave had spread far. It would fade with time, but not completely. Echoes would remain in data streams and old satellites, in the dreams of those sensitive to resonance. The Krothar could not unmake what had already been remembered. But echoes were not enough. They needed a voice, a place, a way to keep the memory alive. Claire leaned forward. There is a station, near the neutral rim, called Haven 7. It is not official, not on any registry, just a patchwork of salvaged hulls and stubborn people who refuse to pick sides. My uncle ran it before the Krothar hit Persephone. If he is still alive, he will give us shelter. Alara studied her. Why would he help us? Because he hates silence, Claire said. And the Krothar are the loudest kind of quiet. The pod's engines were weak but functional. Maya spent hours rewiring the navigation array using parts from her own toolkit. Leah treated minor burns and checked vitals with quiet efficiency. Dana monitored long-range scans for Krothar signatures. Zine stayed close to Alara, his presence a steady warmth in the cold metal shell. As they traveled, the shard began to change. It pulsed more strongly, not just with memory, but with something new. Intention. It responded to Alara's thoughts, to Zin's resonance, to even the humans' voices when they spoke softly in the dark. It was learning, adapting, becoming more than a record, a seed. 3 cycles later, they reached the edge of the neutral rim. The stars here were older, dimmer, crowded together like survivors huddled for warmth, and there in the shadow of a dead gas giant hung Haven 7. It was not beautiful. A tangle of freighter hulls, cargo containers, and repurposed warship sections bolted together with hope and weld seams. Solar panels fluttered like ragged wings. Signal buoys blinked in irregular patterns. No weapons bristled from its surface. But Alara felt something as they approached. Life. Messy, stubborn life. A voice crackled over the comm. Identify yourself or drift on. Claire keyed the response. It is Claire, daughter of Mara. We come with fire and memory. A long pause. Then the voice softened. Mara's girl. You live? The docking bay opened like a weary mouth. Inside, the station smelled of oil stew and ozone. People moved through the corridors, not in uniform, but in patched clothes, their faces lined with stories. They did not stare at Alara or Zin. They simply nodded, as if strangers with dragons were common here. An old man waited at the end of the bay. His hair was white, his hands gnarled, but his eyes were sharp. He looked at Claire and smiled. You look like her. Claire hugged him tightly. I tried to. He turned to Alara. And you must be the last Silthari. Alara stiffened. Word travels fast, not word song. We felt it. When Varelli's broke, it was like hearing a voice after a lifetime of silence. His name was Ellis. He had built Haven 7 from the wreckage of a dozen lost causes. Traders, rebels, refugees all found shelter here as long as they brought no war to the doorstep. He led them to a quiet chamber lined with old data terminals and shelves of physical books. A rare thing in this age. You can stay, he said, as long as you need. But know this. The Krothar have eyes everywhere, even here. We know, Alara said. That night they gathered in the chamber. Ellis brought stew and strong tea. Sin lay in the center of the room, His tail curled around the humans like a protective loop. Alara placed the shard on the table. It glowed brighter in the dim light. "What is it, really?" Dana asked. "It is the heart of my people," Alara said. "Not just what they knew, but who they were. Their joys, their fears, their songs. It is alive in its own way." "Can it grow, Alara?" I looked at Zin. "Yes, but it needs a home, a place where memory can take root." Ellis nodded slowly. "There is a vault below the station. Shielded, built to hold things the galaxy tried to forget. You can use it." Over the next few days, they worked. Maya and Leah helped install power conduits to the vault. Dana mapped the shard's resonance patterns, trying to understand how it stored and shared memory. Claire stood watch, her rifle always within reach. Ellis brought supplies and quiet wisdom. Alara spent hours in the vault with Zin. She sang to the shard, told it stories of her childhood, of her people's festivals, of the way starlight looked through the crystal trees of her home. Sign added his own memories, his bond with her. The feel of solar winds under his wings, the taste of ion storms. The shard grew, not in size, but in depth. New glyphs formed on its surface. New harmonics hummed in its core. It was becoming more than an archive. It was becoming a bridge. One evening, Ellis found Alara alone in the vault. "You are not just preserving memory," he said. "You are making new ones." She looked at him. "Is that wrong? No. It is how memory survives. Not by staying frozen, but by living." But then the alarm sounded. Crothar signatures. 3 ships, dropping out of warp at the edge of the system. They had found them. How? Ellis asked, his voice tight. A data leak. A signal bounce. A traitor. It did not matter. They were coming. Claire gathered the group in the command hub. "We cannot fight them, not here. Not with what we have, we do not have to fight," Leah said. "We just have to make them think we are not worth the trouble." Maya tapped the console. "The station has old stealth protocols. We can mask our signature, mimic a derelict." Dana shook her head. "They will scan for the shard. Its resonance is unique." "Unless we give them something else to chase," Alara said. She looked at Zin. He understood. His eyes gleamed with quiet fire. "No," Claire said. "Not again." "It is the only way," Alara replied. "Zin can carry a decoy shard, a fragment we split from the core. It will echo the same frequency but burn out after a few hours, enough to draw them away." Zin lowered his head. He was ready. They prepared quickly. Maya rigged a small pod with false readings. Leah packed emergency supplies. Dana synced the decoy shard to mimic the original. Claire checked Zin's harness, her hands trembling only slightly. "You come back," she told him. "No heroics?" He rumbled softly. "Not a promise, but an understanding." As the Crothar ships closed in, Zin launched from the station, his wings catching the faint starlight. The decoy shard pulsed in his claws, broadcasting the Silthari song across open frequencies. The Crothar took the bait. 2 ships broke off to pursue him. The third remained hovering near the station. Its sensors sweeping the area. "They are not fooled," Ellis said. "Just cautious." Alara watched the display, her heart in her throat. Zin flew not toward open space, but into the asteroid belt surrounding the gas giant. He knew the terrain. He had flown it before in dreams shared with her. Minutes passed. Then an explosion lit the screen. Not Zin, a Crothar scout drone. He had lured it into a magnetic shear and detonated it. "Clever boy," Leah whispered. Then another explosion. Closer. Zin was leading them through the belt, using the asteroids as cover. The decoy shard flared brightly, then went dark. The Crothar ship circled, confused. "Now," Ellis said, "activate the station's ghost protocol." Maya hit the switch. Haven 7 powered down. Lights off. Engines silent. Life signs masked. To the Crothar it would appear abandoned. A dead station. The remaining warship scanned it for a long time. Then slowly it turned and followed the others into the belt. They held their breath. An hour passed. Then 2. The Crothar did not return. Zin came back at dawn, his scales scorched but his eyes bright. He landed silently in the bay and dropped the burnt-out decoy at Alara's feet. She hugged him tightly. "You came back." "Of course," he seemed to say. In the vault, the true shard pulsed stronger than ever, as if it had felt his absence and welcomed his return. That night they gathered again. Ellis poured tea. Claire smiled for the first time in days. Maya sketched Zin's flight path on a scrap of paper. Leah hummed a Silthari lullaby she had heard Alara sing. Dana recorded everything. Alara looked at them. You did not have to do this. Any of this we know, Claire said. But someone had to remember. And someone had to care. The Crother would return. The war was not over. But here in this broken station on the edge of everything, a new kind of resistance was growing. Not with guns or fleets, but with memory, with song, with the simple act of refusing to let another soul vanish without witness. And for the first time, Alara believed her people might not just be remembered. They might live again. Weeks passed in the quiet hum of Haven 7. The station drifted in its slow orbit around the dead gas giant, its patched hull, catching the faint light of distant stars. Inside, life settled into a rhythm not of peace but of purpose. Alara spent her days in the shielded vault below the main deck, where the memory shard rested on a pedestal of salvaged Silthari alloy. It no longer glowed with the soft silver of stored history. Now it pulsed with something deeper, warmer, like a living heart wrapped in starlight. Zin stayed close. He no longer needed to guard her. The threat had not vanished, but it had changed. The Crother still hunted, but now they hunted a ghost, a rumor. A song that would not die. And in that space between fear and silence, something new grew. The humans became part of the rhythm. Claire took watch shifts on the outer sensors, her eyes always scanning for the telltale shadow of obsidian hulls. Maya worked with Ellis to reinforce the station's stealth systems, weaving old human tech with fragments of Silthari resonance dampeners recovered from Alara's ship. Leah turned a storage bay into a small med bay and began cataloging the shard's effects on living tissue, noting how its presence seemed to accelerate healing and calm neural stress. Dana recorded everything, not just data but stories. She interviewed Alara about Silthari festivals, about the way their children learned to read starlight, about the songs they sang to dying stars. She wrote it all down in plain text on old tablets so that even if the shard fell, the words would remain. Ellis watched it all with quiet pride. He had built Haven 7 as a refuge for those the galaxy forgot. But now it was becoming something more, a seedbed. One evening he found Alara on the observation deck staring out at the belt where Zin had flown his decoy run. "You are thinking of leaving," he said. She did not turn. "Not yet. But soon. The shard is ready. It is more than ready. It is calling." He nodded. "Memory does that. It does not like to stay still." She finally looked at him. "You gave us shelter. You asked for nothing." "I asked for everything," he said softly. "I asked to remember what it means to be human, to care when it costs you, to stand when you could run. You and your dragon reminded us." She smiled faintly. "We reminded each other." The next morning the shard pulsed with a new frequency, not a memory, a location. Deep in the outer spiral near the edge of mapped space, a place the Silthari once called the Cradle, a nebula where newborn stars swirled in harmonic resonance. It was there their first archive had been grown, and there the shard believed it could take root again, not as a vault but as a living world. But to reach it they would need more than a pod. They would need a ship, and not just any ship. One that could carry the shard without interference. One that could slip past Crothar patrols. One that could survive the radiation storms of the spiral rim. Claire had an idea. "There is a vessel," she said, "hidden in the derelict field beyond the belt. The Astra. It was my mother's ship, fast, quiet, built for deep runs. We left it there when we fled Persephone. I never thought I would go back." "You do not have to do this," Alara said. "We do," Claire replied. "Because now it is not just your fight. It is ours." Preparations began at once. Maya and Ellis worked on power cells and shield emitters. Leah packed medical supplies and nutrient packs that would last months. Dana loaded every story she had recorded onto hardened drives and embedded them in the ship's core memory. Zin tested the Astra's cargo bay with slow, careful steps, his claws clicking softly on the deck. Alara spent one last night in the vault. She placed her hands on the shard and sang not a lullaby this time but a vow. A promise that she would carry her people not as a burden, but as a future. The shard responded with a warmth that spread through her bones. The journey to the derelict field took 2 days. They flew in the pod, Zin curled in the rear, his eyes half closed but alert. The field was a graveyard of ship's hulls twisted by time and battle. Some floated intact. Others were shattered skeletons. The Astra waited near the center, its hull scarred but whole, its name barely visible under layers of dust. Claire's hands trembled as she keyed the entry code. The hatch opened with a sigh. Inside it smelled of old leather and ozone. The cockpit was small but clean. The controls familiar. She ran a hand over the pilot's chair. "My mother sat here the day the sky burned. They worked through the night. Maya brought the engines online. Leah checked life support. Dana synced the nav computer to the shard's coordinates. Sun settled in the cargo bay, his presence a steady hum beneath the ship's systems. Allura stood at the viewport watching the stars. She thought of her home, of the archive on Varelli's, of the silence that had followed her for so long. And then she thought of Claire's laugh, Maya's steady hands, Leah's quiet strength, Dana's endless curiosity. They had not saved her. They had seen her. And in seeing her, they had given her back to herself. The Astra launched at dawn. They flew for 12 cycles through empty space, then into the storm-racked rim where stars were born in fire and chaos. The ship groaned but held. The shard glowed brighter with every light year. Sun stayed near it, his resonance harmonizing with its pulse. And then they saw it. The cradle. A nebula of swirling gas and newborn stars, its colors shifting between violet and gold. At its center floated a small planetoid, its surface smooth and warm. No scans showed life, but the shard sang. They landed in a valley where the ground shimmered like liquid glass. Allura stepped out first, her boots sinking slightly into the warm soil. Zin followed, his wings spread to catch the stellar winds. The humans came behind her, their faces lit by the nebula's glow. "This is it," Allura whispered. She carried the shard to the center of the valley and placed it on the ground. It sank slightly, then began to pulse in time with the planetoid's core. Light spread from it like roots. The soil shimmered brighter. The air hummed with a sound like distant singing. "It is growing," Leah said in awe. "Not just growing," Dana added. "Remembering." Over the next few days, they watched as the shard transformed the valley. Crystalline trees rose from the ground, their branches humming with ancestral voices. Pools of liquid light formed, reflecting not images but feelings. The air grew thick with the scent of silthery blossoms long thought extinct. Allura knew then that her people would not return as they were, but they would return. In song and light, in the quiet spaces between stars, the humans prepared to leave. The Astra could not stay. The Crother would eventually trace the energy signature, but they had done what they came to do. Claire stood beside Allura one last time. "You will be safe here, as safe as anyone can be in this galaxy. That is enough." They hugged, not as strangers, not as saviors, but as friends. As the Astra lifted off, Allura watched from the valley, her hand resting on Zin's neck. The ship vanished into the nebula, its engines flaring like a final promise. She turned back to the growing archive. The wind carried a new song, not of loss, but of beginning. No one had helped her before. No one had cared. But the humans had done the unimaginable. They had stayed. They had fought. They had believed. And because of them, the Silthari would not be forgotten. They would live again, not in the past, but in the future. In every note of every song and every light that bloomed in the dark, Allura sat beneath a newborn crystal tree and began to sing. Zin lay beside her, his eyes closed, his breath slow and deep. The stars above watched in silence, but it was not the silence of erasure. It was the silence of waiting, of hope. And in that silence, a new story began.